REI Co-op presents a perfect outdoor moment with the perfect gift. Picture this. You're ripping with your favorite person. Bluebird skies, blower powder, and frankly, you're skiing like legends.
So sick. Another lap?
Thanks to REI's curation, from lid to sticks, you nailed the gift.
No way. How'd you know?
Does it get more perfect than that? Give without guessing. Shop in store or visit rei.com.
And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth, but not such a great day when it comes to economic news. CNBC is reporting that consumer confidence hit its lowest point since April as job worries grow. And people looking forward to Thanksgiving in 2 days, those people who are planning a big Thanksgiving meal will be set back this year around 107.9% more than in 2024. The meal is going to cost an average of 107.9%. And in 2024, the average cost of a meal was $98.37. So you're talking about a significant increase in the cost of food, despite the fact what President Trump says and keeps saying, and none of that is true. There is an analysis by the Times of the recipes and the latest inflation figures from the Department of Agriculture and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Turkey costs are supposed to be, according to those Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, up 24%. The national average for regular gas stood at $3.55 on Tuesday, almost exactly the same as the 3.056 a year ago under President Joe Biden. That according to the AAA. Meanwhile, there is Trump's Obamacare light proposal. The White House has reportedly delayed a planned announcement of the president's health care proposal following opposition from members of his own party. That, of course, would be the Republican Party. The Hill is reporting on this. And you remember yesterday we were talking about the coming forward with a concept and not a specific plan, but at least a concept about the Obamacare light proposal, but they didn't come through with it. At this point, the delay is reported by multiple outlets, and they are also reporting that the plan was set to include a 2-year extension of the expiring Obamacare subsidies, which Democrats have focused on, with new eligibility limits, including income caps and minimum premium payments. Okay, to understand what all of this would mean to you or to the country at large is going to be complicated. The report is that the rollout has been postponed and the plan is being reworked. Republicans told the outlet, MS Now, that they were surprised and angered by the plan, which would help keep the Affordable Care Act in place. And again, what this highlights is how pathetic and unnecessary and misguided the 45-day White House government shutdown was. It's not the White House shutdown. It's a shutdown because the White House and the Congress could not see eye to eye on the two sides of the political spectrum. MS Now reported the rollout has been postponed, and the idea is keeping the ACA in place. CBS News is reporting that Speaker Mike Johnson has told the White House that most House Republicans have little interest in extending the Affordable Care Act's enhanced subsidies, which were placed into the system during the pandemic. Sources familiar with the conversation told CBS News. Mike Johnson delivered the message in a phone call with senior administration officials as President Trump's advisors were drafting a plan to continue the subsidies for an additional 2 years. That plan that was initially expected to emerge this week, but it hasn't been emerged and is nowhere right now. Meanwhile, the Washington Post is reporting that the U.S. and Ukraine are moving forward on a peace deal, but Russian rejection is likely. And that despite the fact that the 28 points of that peace deal seem to be giving Russia everything that Russia had asked for. All these negotiations may be for nothing, however, as the work to make the 28-point U.S. plan more acceptable to Ukraine is precisely what will doom it with Russia. In other words, they're still fighting a war because there is still a disagreement, and the disagreement basically is whether Ukraine should continue to exist as a separate, independent, sovereign nation. Russia and Ukraine traded deadly attacks overnight, killing and wounding civilians and damaging infrastructure. The damaging infrastructure just sounds so cold and irrelevant, but when you look at the pictures and you look at some of these, some of them are very old and historic buildings that have been just wiped out and devastated, and how difficult it is to rebuild that infrastructure. In Kyiv, the strikes caused, quote, extensive damage to residential buildings and targeted, quote, the energy sector and everything that keeps normal life going. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine, meanwhile, launched a major drone attack on Russia, damaging numerous structures in the Russian port city of Novorossiysk, local authorities said. I'm not familiar with that port city. This comes as U.S. and Russian officials are holding meetings in Abu Dhabi today to discuss a proposed plan to end the war. This is U.S. and Russian officials. The Ukrainians are not participating, and they are affected more heavily and more directly and more deeply than any of the other nations involved. Meanwhile, Fox is reporting that the FBI and the Department of Justice have contacted Capitol Police to schedule interviews with the 6 members of Congress who appeared in a controversial video urging service members to ignore illegal orders that they might receive through the chain of command. Fox News reporting that last week a group of Democratic lawmakers with military and intelligence backgrounds, including Senator Elisa Slotkin of Michigan, Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, Representative Christy Lucio of Pennsylvania, Representative Maggie Goodlander of New Hampshire, and Representative Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania and Jason Crow of Colorado. They all together released a video directed at service members and intelligence officers stating, "Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders." In response to the video, President Donald Trump said the lawmakers should be arrested and tried for seditious behavior. He also sent along on his Truth Social platform a message that he had received calling not just for their arrest and trial for seditious behavior, but their execution for treason. Is this going to be interfering with our enjoyment of Thanksgiving for the nation at large? We will get to that question and more with more legal news coming up on The Medved Show.
Every successful business evolves. And to keep up, you need a bank relationship that evolves too. When you collaborate with KeyBank, you don't get one-size-fits-all solutions. Our expansive team of experts across industry verticals wouldn't be here if you did. Always ready with bespoke solutions for your biggest challenges and opportunities. We know all businesses are different, and that's why we approach business differently. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Learn more at key.com/B2B.
Coming up on the Michael Medved Show, we're going to be talking about some of the content in this magnificent new series about the American Revolution, a new Ken Burns series that has been a gigantic impact in terms of getting people to appreciate the significance of the American Revolution and how it's changed the world. But there's a dispute involved with one of the earliest points made in that very much heralded TV production, a claim that the whole idea of the United States was first invented by the Indians, by the Iroquois Confederacy. That's the 6 tribes who had banded together, mostly in upstate New York and in New England. Is that true? We'll be speaking to Dan McLaughlin of National Review about that. We'll also be speaking later to Frank Bruni of the New York Times concerning the argument that you hear all the time, which is however weird or bad or destructive Trump may be, he's not as bad as Joe Biden. And we will get to that as well on the Michael Medved Show. Meanwhile, I had mentioned that there was more legal news, and it's actually news about a federal judge who yesterday dismissed the prosecutions against both the FBI director, former FBI director James Comey, and New York Attorney General Letitia James. Dealing a significant blow to President Trump's retribution tour against political foes. The judge ruled that the cases were invalid because the prosecutor who brought the charges, as I mentioned before, a rookie lawyer who had never prosecuted anything before, and she had brought the charges at the direction of the Attorney General, who was acting at the direction of the president. She is an interim U.S. attorney named Lindsay Halligan. But she apparently, according to the judge's decision, had been unlawfully appointed. Trump selected Halligan for the role after forcing out the sitting U.S. attorney, someone with considerably more experience, who resisted bringing the cases, and who President Trump not only welcomed forcing out the Siebert, the existing attorney, but he pleaded directly with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to make the prosecutions happen. Bondi yesterday said that the Justice Department will take all available legal action, including an immediate appeal to address the decision. But this is one of those things where, regardless of how one feels about the charges against Letitia James, and James Comey, however you feel about it, these are very, very dicey cases. And the idea of getting a conviction against James Comey, especially because his case, they're coming up to a statute of limitations. It's going to be too long a time period between the alleged commission of this wrongdoing and the idea of bringing forward this case. Meanwhile, in other legal news, the U.S. has formally designated the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, who really is a dictator. They've designated him now a member of foreign terrorist organization. The step gives the Trump administration more power to go after Maduro, his government allies, and his assets. Trump officials say the designation, one of the State Department's most serious counterterrorism tools, also opens the door to expanded U.S. military options for strikes inside Venezuela. The administration says the effort is aimed at curbing illegal flows of migrants and drugs from the region, but regime change is a possible side effect of those efforts, experts say. What it means is whether or not you have him designated as part of a foreign terrorist organization or not, it still means a potential war. And Venezuela, which claims that it has 8 million soldiers, potentially, if you include the militia and their equivalent of the National Guard, they don't have that, but they say they do. And they do have certainly 150,000 people at minimum who are under arms and apparently ready to fight. This is all very disturbing and goes along with the very controversial idea of hitting drug boats off the coast of Venezuela and Colombia. And this is one of the issues that is behind the ongoing dispute where yesterday they came after Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, former astronaut, a captain in the U.S. Navy, and with a very impressive military background. And they came after him with a threat of being called up to active duty so that he could be court-martialed, which, of course, could give President Trump what he says he wants, which is imprisonment and perhaps even execution. Coming up, we're going to be talking with Frank Bruni of the New York Times about the comparison between weirdness and self-dealing and wrongdoing by Joe Biden and what's going on with the Trump administration. Is there any honest comparison between those two governments? And we will also be speaking a little bit later to Dan McLaughlin, a senior writer at National Review and a fellow at the National Review Institute, formerly an attorney practicing securities and commercial litigation in New York City, and now the author of a very well-researched and impressive critique of some of the very first quotations used by Ken Burns in his massive new series about the American Revolution. We will get to that as well coming up on the MedVet Show.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. Jay Kelly, the new film from Academy Award nominee Noah Baumbach. George Clooney stars as an actor confronting his past and present on a journey of self-discovery, alongside Adam Sandler as his devoted manager. Critics are calling it a declaration of love to the chaotic art of filmmaking, with the Wall Street Journal praising it as a transcendent comedy drama. Jay Kelly is now playing in select theaters and on Netflix December 5th.
Frank Bruni is a contributing opinion writer who joined the New York Times, believe it or not, some 30 years ago, and has ranged broadly across its pages. He's been both a White House correspondent and the chief restaurant critic. His book, which just came out this year in paperback, is The Age of Grievance, which is insightful and amusing. It's a 2022 reflection on illness, aging, and optimism. And in the summer of 2021, he became a professor of journalism and public policy at Duke University. His most recent piece in the New York Times today is under the headline, "The False Equivalences That Prop Up Trump." And you take note of something that we've discussed on the air a little bit, Frank, which is that whenever there's something embarrassing or negative, the Trump team immediately brings up Joe Biden. Is it really a false equivalence for him to so repeatedly say, well, what Biden did was worse?
I think so. I mean, it depends which issue you're talking about, but to give one example, and I think a really kind of clear one, you hear a lot from Republicans, from Trump, from the MAGA wing in particular, about lawfare and all that Joe Biden did to kind of weaponize the presidency in pursuit of prosecuting Donald Trump. Well, for starters, the cases against Donald Trump, with the sole exception, perhaps, of the Alvin Bragg case in Manhattan, the Stormy Daniels case, as people remember it, the cases against Trump had enormous detail, evidence. They were strong cases. I mean, in the case of Georgia and election interference there, you had an audio tape of Donald Trump haranguing the Secretary of State of Georgia, the top election official, to find him votes somewhere, to just discover votes and change the tally. Now you have Donald Trump doing things so aggressive that just yesterday, the cases against James Comey and Letitia James were thrown out because they were done so haphazardly, so against any sort of proper procedure, that they had to be dismissed. So that is in no way equivalent with the prosecutions that were started and then had to be abandoned against President Trump. And yet he and his supporters portray it as if it's all the same thing.
You mentioned the very, very consistent focus on the part of the Trump administration on the idea that the election of 2020 was stolen. There's nothing comparable. I don't think I've ever heard Joe Biden or even Hunter Biden or anyone in the, quote, Biden crime family that MAGA people like to talk about. No one who's talked about any of Biden's election defeats ever being stolen, right?
Not at all. That's absolutely correct. I mean, if you look on the left fringes, you can find some people who, after Kamala Harris's defeat in 2024, said, "Wait a second, we're not sure this is legit." It is in no way in proportion to or commensurate with what you saw on the MAGA right after 2020. And as you just said, the key thing here is you didn't hear Kamala Harris saying that her election was stolen. You didn't hear Joe Biden saying that about Kamala Harris's defeat. You heard nothing like what you heard from Trump and from all of his supporters and from Rudy Giuliani and on and on. And I'll give you one more. You saw nothing after Kamala Harris's 2024 defeat that was anything in the league of the insurrection of January 6th, 2021, which Trump was, I think, to most of our observations, involved in. He incited that crowd. That crowd acted after weeks of Trump having said that Democrats were stealing the election, that there was a conspiracy afoot, on and on. You see nothing analogous to that from the Democratic establishment in or after 2024. Nothing.
Well, again, it also goes to the use of pardon powers and the general space that is provided for all kinds of dubious things by people that Trump has appointed to high office. Do you think that anything will come of the fact that who knew? Kash Patel has a girlfriend who's a country singer, and he has used FBI resources to provide her with protection and security so she can travel along with him. on some of his FBI business. Have you been following that story?
Absolutely. Everything you said has come out in the last couple of days, and it's come out after and on top of there were already many reports, many complaints from sources within the FBI about him using his government plane, his access to a government plane for kind of fun personal stuff like golf trips with buddies. This is part and parcel of the way so many of the people around President Trump behave, because it's part and parcel of how the president behaves. They're essentially, it feels like a kleptocracy is one of the terms you see used for it, where they're all sort of their idea of inhabiting these offices is wringing them for all the fun and material benefit that the offices are worth. Again, we started out talking about false equivalences. I think they send the message to their supporters, and their supporters tell themselves, well, this is how everybody in power behaves these days. They're all corrupt, in Washington and around Washington. Our guys are no different from the others. They just get more guff because there's this Trump derangement syndrome. It's not true. It's not true. What Trump and Kash Patel and the rest of them are doing is beyond what we've seen before. You asked if they'll get their comeuppance. I don't know. It depends on who's in power after 2026. It depends on who has the congressional majority. But even if Democrats end up with a House majority and have the power to convene investigations and committee hearings and call people before Congress, I don't know that they will do it to the extent that is justified, because the narrative right now around politics is that whenever somebody does this, it's just partisanship and it just kind of intensifies that toxic climate. So they may actually hold off, and some of these people like Kash Patel may get away with it because Democrats don't want to perpetuate this idea that all of politics is persecution of your opponents.
Well, again, it's a very complicated situation, especially when so much of the MAGA message is about the Biden crime family, is about the deep state and draining the swamp. How's that swamp drain going?
Well, I know you've asked that as a rhetorical question, but let's talk about the Biden crime family for a second, which makes them sound like the Corleones of Wilmington, Delaware or something, right? Listen, Hunter Biden was an ethical calamity, an ethical disaster. I wrote that in my most recent piece. There's no denying that, and there's no denying that Hunter Biden was making millions off not any sort of proven expertise, but of people putting him on boards and hiring him because they assumed the Biden surname would work magic for them and they'd have access. Joe Biden had a brother who grew suspiciously wealthier during his presidency. And it does seem that Joe Biden, at the very least, turned a blind eye to all of that. And that's not okay. And even if you believe Joe Biden is a decent man on balance and was a good president, you need to be able to say that's not okay. However, that is nothing like the estimates of more than $3 billion by which Trump and his closest allies and his sons, et cetera, have seemingly been enriched in his now 5 years, the first term plus a year in the presidency. This is of a scale that's completely different.
It's all together in the piece by Frank Bruni, the outrageous false equivalences that prop up President Trump. Aren't his apologists exhausted by their moral calisthenics? Great reading, as always. A happy Thanksgiving to you, Frank, and Godspeed. Coming up, we'll go to the latest about Trump wanting to prosecute, imprison, and execute, probably in that order, a group of Republicans in the House and Senate.
Medved.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
And there are literally millions of Americans who feel exhausted by all of the public attention and fascination and obsession with the Jeffrey Epstein files. So as an alternative, there is this headline: FBI chief under scrutiny for use of security teams. That FBI chief is not Christopher Wray. No, he served under President Trump and President Biden. But the FBI chief they're talking about is Kash Patel. And the story reports that when Alexis Wilkins, who was an aspiring country singer dating FBI Director Kash Patel, who knew, when she sang the Star-Spangled Banner at the National Rifle Association's annual convention in Atlanta in the spring, she arrived to that convention with a SWAT team from the FBI's local field office. The two agents, members of a specialized unit trained to storm barricaded buildings and rescue hostages, had been sent there on Kash Patel's direct orders, seeking the protection of his girlfriend. But seeing that the event at the Georgia World Congress Center had been secured and that Wilkins was in no apparent danger, they left before the event was over. Patel's use of taxpayer-funded resources, right as a whole crew of reporters at the New York Times, Patel's use of taxpayer-funded resources during his first 9 months on the job has contributed to growing questions inside the administration about whether it exceeds the bounds of standard practice. He also has used a government jet for some of his recreational travel, such as a golf trip with buddies to a private resort in Scotland over the summer. Is she considered Kash's spouse? Asks Grace Chong, an influencer who works for Donald Trump's allies, Stephen Bannon. She asked that in the social platform X recently. Is that why she's getting protection? Because if not, then why are we paying for that? And it's a great deal to pay for. Government security protection for Wilkins to attend events or performances has drawn particularly attention, including criticism from some of the same right-wing online personalities that supported Kash Patel's efforts to shake up the Bureau. The director has his own security detail that protects Wilkins if the two travel together. But current and former FBI officials said that the use of SWAT agents to protect Patel's girlfriend was highly unusual given their specialized and often dangerous duties, such as executing high-risk warrants and investigating cases. SWAT teams do not receive extensive trainings in VIP protection at the FBI Academy, but have been used to supplement the director's security detail in certain circumstances, such as a trip that Patel took to Britain in May, or another that his predecessors, Robert Mueller, once took to Iraq. So a real question on that. And a real question concerning President Trump's repeated insistence about prosecuting and trying, imprisoning, and then executing people like Senator Mark Kelly and people who were part of that Democratic group of 6 members of the House and Senate who put out a brief video, and it's very brief, reminding people that if you wear the uniform, yes, you're obliged to follow orders, but not if the orders are illegal. Ana Navarro on CNN panel described the Trump insistence on going after the people like Mark Kelly, who were part of that video, and basically wrecking their lives and their political careers. This is clip 18.
I think it's insane. I think it's cuckoo crazy that Donald Trump, I'm so glad that Mark Kelly is a naval aviator and an astronaut, because we are living in the twilight zone. I mean, it makes zero sense that Donald Trump would be so triggered by a video of people saying basically, don't break the law, don't do something illegal. I don't know. Somebody goes out and says a video, don't, rob a bank.
Don't drink and drive.
This is not something that should be triggering. And his overreaction to this. And then hauling Mark Kelly, who is a patriot, a national hero, a naval aviator that flew 39 combat missions in the Gulf War. And for Captain Bone Spurs to be impugning Mark Kelly like this over the stupidest thing, it just makes no sense. And I really think it's it should be a moment of unity where we all say, God, you're going overboard. I mean, Republican or Democrat, it just makes no damn sense.
Okay, now, of course she's right, but I do think that someone ought to mention that it was probably not the most necessary or appropriate step to take these 6 members of Congress, Democrats, and to put forward this reminder that they could have done with more discretion about the idea that, yes, you are absolved from being forced to follow orders if the orders are illegal. Meanwhile, there is a scathing statement about President Trump that was made before the case against him was thrown out. And the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has confirmed an appeal is underway after a judge dismissed the cases against James Comey and the Attorney General in New York State, Letitia James, will be taking all available legal action, including an immediate appeal to hold them accountable. So said Pam Bondi. This is the statement that James Comey issued right after the case was brought against him and before it was thrown out. Clip 25.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence, and a reflection of what the Department of Justice has become under Donald Trump, which is heartbreaking. But I was also inspired by the example of the career people who refused to be part of this travesty. It cost some of them their jobs, which is painful, but it preserved their integrity, which is beyond price. And I know they will serve again. I was very lucky that some of the best lawyers in America stepped forward to represent me. I hope they serve as an example to more and more lawyers, especially at some of the big firms, to participate in protecting our liberty, protecting the rule of law. This case mattered to me personally, obviously, but it matters most because a message has to be sent that the President of the United States cannot use the Department of Justice to target his political enemies. I don't care what your politics are, you have to see that as fundamentally un-American and a threat to the rule of law that keeps all of us free.
And coming up, there is the conclusion of James Comey's statement, recalling a story about what his parents would say to him every morning. We'll also be speaking to Dan McLaughlin of National Review about the new Ken Burns special about the American Revolution. It's 12 hours total, 6 different segments. But the first segment begins not by talking necessarily about Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, authors of the Declaration of Independence, it talks about the Iroquois authorship of a confederation idea, which some people on the left seem to claim was the true origin of the United States of America. Was it really? We will get to that with Dan McLaughlin and more coming up in This Greatest Nation on God's Green Earth.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.